A missing woman is recovering after she was found inside a locked shipping container. This video shows her after she was rescued.
Baltimore City Police found the body of a 75-year-old woman who had been missing for months.
Cargo containers are supposed to carry goods, cars, electronics, maybe furniture. But what happens when one gets opened and instead of cargo, you find something that chills you to the bone? So without wasting any more time, here are times. People opened up a shipping container and instantly regretted it.
Our main story is the discovery of 39 bodies in a lorry container in Essex. The vehicle, which is thought to have crossed the English Channel from Zeebrugge in Belgium to the port of Tilbury in Essex, was apparently being driven by a 25-year-old man from Northern Ireland who's been arrested on suspicion of murder.
It looked like a regular delivery, a refrigerated container hauled in overnight and parked at an industrial site in Grays, Essex. But when workers opened the doors that morning, they weren't prepared for what they'd find. Inside were the 39 Vietnamese migrants, 31 men and 8 women. Most of them had died from trapped in freezing temperatures with no fresh air. Some of the victims were just teenagers. The container had traveled across the English Channel from Zeebrugge, Belgium, and arrived in the early hours of October 23, 2019. The driver of the truck was arrested on the spot, and it didn't take long for authorities to uncover the horrifying truth. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was a well-organized operation, part of a vast international network into the UK. The public response was immediate and emotional. Candlelit vigils were held. Communities in Vietnam mourned the loss of sons and daughters who had risked everything for a better future. The story made global headlines and sparked debates about immigration policies and the growing dangers of migration routes. The case became one of the UK's worst modern day, and it forced major changes in how cargo inspections are handled at European ports. And so, if that sounds like the worst it could get, what came next was even harder to believe. Thousands of miles away in Africa, another container was opened, and what was inside made even seasoned investigators break down on the spot. In March 2020, border officers in Tate Province, Mozambique, flagged down a suspicious blue truck at a checkpoint. Nothing about it stood out until they cracked open the rear container. Inside were 78 Ethiopian migrants, packed together in suffocating heat, but only 14 were still alive. The rest, 64 people, had already died, crumpled on top of each other, victims of extreme heat and zero ventilation. Some were just boys. They had been crammed into the metal container in Malawi, likely told it was a route to safety or work. The temperature outside that day was nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside the container is just even worse. The next container wouldn't just hold, it would hold a mystery, one that stretched across continents and left even customs agents speechless. When dock workers in Asunción, Paraguay, cracked open a fertilizer container from Europe, they weren't expecting anything out of the ordinary. It had been sitting at the port for days, but the moment they unsealed it, they were hit with a smell they'd never forget. Inside were the badly decomposed of 7 men, along with mattresses, clothing, and scattered bits of food and water bottles. Authorities quickly identified the container's origin: Serbia, where it had been loaded back in July 2020. But it wasn't supposed to be in Paraguay. The container had taken a wrong turn, literally. Instead of heading to its expected destination in Italy, it had traveled from Serbia to Croatia, through Egypt and Spain, then crossed the Atlantic, arriving in Argentina before making its final stop in Paraguay. A journey of over 6,000 miles. The 7 men, believed to be migrants from Morocco, Algeria, and Egypt, had boarded the container in Serbia, hoping to be smuggled into Europe, but they were locked inside with no way out. With no airflow, dwindling supplies, and soaring temperatures, investigators believe they likely died within the first few days. By the time the container reached South America 4 months later, due to the heat and chemical exposure from the fertilizer, police in Serbia later arrested 2 men suspected of organizing the illegal passage. International agencies condemned the incident, calling it a tragic example of how migrant desperation is being exploited by smugglers with zero concern for human life. The Paraguayan public was stunned, not just by the loss of life, but by the realization that such a horrific journey could go undetected for months. The case sparked renewed calls for stricter international cargo inspections and better migrant protections. As devastating as this case was, the next container didn't carry 7. It carried 1 barely clinging on, and a discovery that would make headlines across 2 continents. Port Klang, Malaysia, January 2023. Dock workers were unloading a container ship from Bangladesh when they heard something strange. Faint banging from inside one of the steel boxes. They called the police, fearing the worst. When the container was opened, a 15-year-old boy stumbled out, barely conscious, disoriented, and severely dehydrated. He couldn't speak the local language, and no one could understand how he had ended up there. The boy's name was Fahim, and his story was nothing short of unbelievable. 6 days earlier, he had been playing hide and seek with friends near the port in Chittagong. Looking for a good hiding spot, he climbed into an open shipping container and accidentally locked himself inside. Before anyone could find him, the container was sealed, loaded onto a cargo ship, and set off for Malaysia. Authorities were stunned. Fahim had survived nearly a week at sea with no food, no water, and no light. Medical staff rushed him to a hospital where he was treated for severe dehydration and exhaustion. Miraculously, he pulled through. At first, Malaysian police suspected human trafficking, but after a full investigation, including interviews, translated statements, and security footage, they confirmed that it was just a tragic accident. The story made headlines across South and Southeast Asia, with many calling Fahim's survival a miracle. And while he eventually returned home safely, this time by plane, his unintentional voyage became a symbol of both how dangerous cargo containers can be and how easily an innocent game can turn into a life or death situation. While Fahim's case ended with relief, the next container would open to something far more sinister. Not just a body, but a woman's body with no explanation, halfway across the world. In April 2024, the quiet rural town of Gulgong in New South Wales, Australia, was rocked by a tragic discovery that left residents in disbelief. Police were called to a remote property along Gulma Road after receiving concerns about the welfare of 2 individuals who had not been seen or heard from in several days. What they found was chilling. Inside one of the on-site shipping containers, authorities discovered of a 37-year-old woman, Kelly Williams, and a 55-year-old man. The scene was grim, and investigators immediately cordoned off the area as a potential crime scene. The property itself, described as a hobby farm, featured multiple vehicles, scattered equipment, and several large shipping containers. Though no one lived there full-time, neighbors said the place was visited regularly. Still, nothing could have prepared them for what had taken place behind closed doors. Forensic teams worked meticulously to uncover what happened. Early reports pointed to the possible use of a portable butane gas heater, likely used by the pair to keep warm inside the container. Tragically, that same heat source may have caused carbon monoxide poisoning, silently overwhelming them in their sleep. Tributes quickly poured in on social media for Ms. Williams, with friends and family expressing heartbreak and remembering her as a kind soul. Locals described the event as shocking and surreal, the kind of thing that just doesn't happen in a place like Gulgong. This only goes to show the deadly risks of using gas-powered devices in confined spaces, especially containers with little to no ventilation. Police have continued their investigation, and a formal report has been submitted to the coroner as the town mourns one of its most disturbing events in recent memory. In early 2024, the town of Cocoa, Florida, became the scene of a rescue story that left both police and locals stunned. A woman who had been missing for nearly 3 days was found alive, trapped inside a shipping container just yards away from several busy businesses. The woman, 52-year-old Marlene Lopez, had been reported missing after she failed to pick up her son, something completely out of character. Police launched a search, and concern grew rapidly. Then, on a quiet morning, someone near Revcut Mower on North Cocoa Boulevard heard banging coming from one of the nearby shipping containers. When they pried open the door, they found her, alive, dehydrated, and disoriented. Lopez had been locked inside the container for nearly 72 hours. Employees from a nearby business recalled seeing her wandering around late Monday night, acting strangely, but no one thought to call it in. Investigators believe she may have entered the container, voluntarily or by accident, and it was later locked from the outside by someone who had no idea she was inside. She was rushed to the hospital and treated for dehydration, but she survived, thanks in large part to the cooler weather at the time. Police admitted that had this happened during Florida's brutal summer months, the outcome would have been fatal. As for how she ended up in the container in the first place, that part remains unclear. Lopez was not in a state to give a full statement, and police are still investigating the strange sequence of events that led her there. But what's clear is this: if no one had heard that banging, this story could have ended very differently. Have you ever walked past a locked container and wondered what might be inside? And as for this next case, which was supposed to be a missing persons investigation, until deputies heard banging from inside a shipping container. In November 2016, authorities in Woodruff, South Carolina, were searching a rural property as part of a months-long investigation into the disappearance of Calla Brown, a 30-year-old woman who had vanished alongside her boyfriend, Charlie Carver. What they didn't expect was to hear knocking coming from inside a 15 by 30 foot shipping container sitting in the middle of the suspect's land. When they opened the container, they found Kayla alive, chained by the neck to the wall, held in place like an animal. She'd been missing for 2 months. She was rescued immediately, and what she told officers next cracked open one of the most chilling criminal cases in South Carolina history. Her abductor, Todd Kohlhepp, was a real estate agent with a horrifying secret. Not only had he kidnapped and restrained Kayla in that container, he had also her boyfriend, whose body was later found buried on the same property. As police kept digging, the story got worse. They discovered multiple other hidden around the land. Kohlhepp would eventually confess to 7, including a 2003 quadruple homicide at a motorcycle shop. The container wasn't just a prison, as it was part of a serial killer's setup. Kayla survived by staying calm, memorizing details, and waiting for a chance. That chance came when police traced her last known phone signal back to Kohlhepp's property. Her rescue was caught on body cam footage and broadcast nationwide. The story made headlines around the world, not just for the horror of her captivity, but because she lived to tell the story. But the next container discovery, though, wasn't about survival. It was about what was left behind and who might have been watching. In late 2022, 75-year-old Versi Spell, a beloved Baltimore resident, was reported missing after family members found her apartment ransacked, doors broken open, her cane and walker left behind, and no sign of her anywhere. She hadn't been seen since October 19th, and her loved ones feared the worst. Nearly 5 months later, on March 3rd, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. Versi's body was found inside a container near a church on Garrison Boulevard, not far from her home. The medical examiner ruled her death a homicide. Versi was a retired federal employee and a cherished usher at Oriole Park at Camden Yards, known for greeting fans with a smile. The Orioles released a statement honoring her memory and service to the community. Family, neighbors, and co-workers were devastated, not just by her murder, but by the thought that she had been so close all along, hidden in plain sight. Her case remains unsolved, with authorities still seeking answers. On February 22, 2025, police in Lodi, California, made a chilling discovery that quickly turned a missing persons case into something far more disturbing. Officers were canvassing the area of South Sacramento Street and East Lodi Avenue, investigating the disappearance of 31-year-old Ibrahim Adam Azize. He had been reported missing 2 days earlier, and his family had been growing increasingly concerned. Then, during a search of a local business property, officers approached a Connex-style shipping container sitting behind the building, the kind used for on-site storage. What they found inside was devastating. Aziza's body, lifeless and hidden from view. The container was locked, and no one had reported any activity near it in the days prior. Authorities quickly sealed off the area and called in forensic teams to begin a full investigation. The San Joaquin County Medical Examiner later confirmed Aziza's identity, but the cause of death has not yet been released. What makes this case especially unsettling is the lack of clarity, how he ended up there, whether foul play was involved, and who else might have known about it. Police have not ruled anything out, but have assured the public there's no active threat. On a quiet August morning in 2014, workers at Tilbury Docks, east of London, were unloading a shipping container from a ferry that had just arrived from Belgium. Everything seemed routine until they heard something unusual: banging, faint cries. Someone was inside. They pried the container open and found a group of 35 people crammed together in the sweltering heat, gasping for air. They were Afghan Sikhs, including men, women, and children as young as 1 year old, all barely alive. One man had already died. The group had been trapped inside the sealed container for hours, possibly more than a full day, with no ventilation and little water. Authorities said they were victims of human trafficking, hidden among cargo and shipped across the English Channel like freight. Emergency responders rushed in, giving oxygen and water to the survivors who were moments from collapsing. Some had collapsed already. The youngest were too weak to speak. Doctors later confirmed that many were severely dehydrated and close to death when found. Police launched a homicide investigation into the man's death and began tracking the trafficking network believed to be responsible. The case made headlines across the UK, highlighting the growing danger of smuggling operations that treat human lives as disposable. Next, we're headed to a container that didn't carry survivors. In December 2023, a fire broke out at Bluegrass Storage in Georgetown, Kentucky, and what firefighters found inside one of the units left them shaken. The fire began suddenly, with smoke pouring from multiple storage units near Connector Road, between Paris Pike and Cherry Blossom Way. As emergency crews arrived on scene, smoke was visible from the nearby bypass, and at least 3 units were engulfed in flames. One of those units contained more than just belongings. After forcing open the steel doors, firefighters discovered a dog trapped inside, barely alive. But shortly after, they made an even more grim discovery: the body of a man in his 60s, deceased inside the unit. It was later revealed that the victim had owned the storage unit himself, though how or why he was inside during the fire remains unclear. One moment, it's just a place to store old belongings. The next, it's a sealed vault of tragedy. And what's in our next container? Well, that's for you to see. In 1982, Los Angeles authorities repossessed a storage container linked to a defunct medical lab. Inside, they uncovered a discovery that would horrify the nation. Approximately 17,000 aborted fetuses, many of them in glass jars, plastic bags, and sealed containers. Some were over 20 weeks gestation, and at least 5 to 7 were deemed possibly viable, meaning they could have survived outside the womb. The lab had collected the remains from abortion clinics across several states, but when it shut down, the bodies were abandoned and left in cold storage. On June 27, 2022, police in San Antonio, Texas, were called to a remote stretch of road near Lackland Air Force Base. What they found was an abandoned tractor trailer. Its doors shut tight in the summer heat. Inside, authorities opened the container to find 53 victims of extreme heat and dehydration. The trailer had no air conditioning, no ventilation, and no water. Under the blistering Texas sun, temperatures inside the trailer likely soared to 150 degrees Fahrenheit, 65 degrees Celsius, were men, women, and teenagers. 16 others, including 4 children, they were rushed to nearby hospitals in critical condition. The victims had traveled from Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, having reportedly paid up to $15,000 for the promise of a better life. But once inside, they were stripped of their cell phones and locked in, with no means to call for help. The truck's driver, Homero Zamorano Jr., was arrested and later pleaded guilty to federal charges that could put him in prison for life. Several others tied to the sting operation were also indicted. This wasn't a tragic accident. It was premeditated, carried out with full knowledge of the risks and complete disregard for the lives inside that container. Mind you, if you think that was horrifying, the next container didn't hold bodies. It held more. In 2018, the Taiwanese cargo ship YM Efficiency lost over 80 shipping containers during rough seas off the coast of New South Wales, Australia. Most of them sank to the ocean floor, but not before leaving behind a trail of debris that stretched hundreds of kilometers along the shoreline. For nearly 2 years, underwater robots and specialized salvage ships from Singapore were deployed to recover the submerged cargo. Out of the 80-plus containers, only 63 were successfully retrieved, some packed with soggy cardboard, old tires, and even Chevrolet pickup trucks, now destined for the scrapyard. The cleanup has cost Australian taxpayers $20 million, while the ship's owner, Yang Ming, continues to fight legal responsibility in court. And yet, this wasn't just a maritime mess, as it became a full-blown environmental crisis, because not all containers stay sealed, and some carry more than just scrap. They carry secrets. In 2019, the MSC Zoe, one of Europe's largest cargo ships, was sailing through the North Sea when it hit a powerful storm en route from Germany to Portugal. The rough seas caused at least 270 shipping containers to fall overboard. Within days, Dutch and German beaches were scattered with everything from flat-screen TVs and car parts to children's toys and shoes. Locals treated it like a treasure hunt, collecting items and storing them in attics to sell later. But that excitement turned into panic when it was revealed that 3 of the containers carried highly flammable and toxic organic peroxide. On one island, a 25-kilogram bag of the substance was discovered among debris, prompting health warnings and emergency cleanup. Officials warned residents to stay clear of the shorelines, as the long-term environmental impact remains unknown. In March 2023, residents in Orangeburg County, South Carolina, began whispering about a rundown, abandoned home on the outskirts of town, one they believed was haunted. The rumors were mostly harmless, until a group of curious locals decided to take a closer look. Drawn by a foul smell, they stepped inside and quickly realized something was very wrong. The odor seemed to be coming from a large freezer sitting out on the back porch. When they opened it, they were met with a gruesome sight: the body of a man decomposing inside the freezer. Authorities were called immediately, and the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Office launched an investigation. They confirmed that the freezer and the home had been abandoned for some time. Deputies say the discovery was only made because people heard stories about the place being haunted and decided to explore it themselves. As of the time of reporting, officials had not released the identity of the deceased, and the cause of death was still under investigation. The body was sent to the state medical examiner's office for autopsy, and authorities asked the public to come forward with any tips. It's one of those stories that seems too bizarre to be true. A horror movie setup turned real-life crime scene, an abandoned house, a freezer on a porch, and a secret that might never have been found if not for local ghost stories. Some containers are built to keep things safe. Others are used to make sure the world never finds what's locked inside. And that's a wrap on the most disturbing discoveries ever made behind the doors of shipping containers. If you made it this far, you're definitely one of us. So go ahead, hit that like button, subscribe, and stick around, because the next story, it might be hiding a lot closer than you think.